Just sort of housekeeping announcement. Poor David's hand is stuck in a monumental traffic jam somewhere, so is delayed. And Chris John from the executive is being green and coming by public transport, and is now subject to a 50-minute train delay. So he is en route. So a warm welcome to all this morning. We are on Teams, and hopefully some members of the public and our staff will be joining us on Teams as well. So all I ask is if people are going to ask a question on Teams, can I ask you please to turn your camera on? And that's this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. You know, we do invite questions at the end of the meeting regarding items on the agenda. Good morning, David. Morning. I know you got the message just in your transporting. So thank you. And if you're online, please, can you go on mute? I think most people are, but just for housekeeping, on mute unless you wish to speak. Are there any apologies for absence we need to know? No, Chairman. Everyone's full. Yeah. Present grad just to transport different. Are there any declarations of interest before we start in terms of items on the agenda? Right. Before we get into the body of the meeting, and David, I know you're unpacking, but I think it's only appropriate, as this is your last visit from the chair, on behalf of the board, I fully acknowledge that you are leading the trust any day now. Based on record, our warm thanks for what you have done to see. Your core responsibilities have been Director of Finance, but you have done many different things as well as that core responsibility. Deputy Executive, Chief Operating Officer, you've always seen our IT function, our procurement function, I'm sure that our contracting function, commercial side, and our estates function. And you know, in this building is one testament to some impressive estate strategy over the years. So on behalf of the board, David, I will thank you. Before you, in best so on the wrapping is the Sundown Field, which for your sideboard, is your course to remember your time with the CCAM, and we thank you warmly for your contribution. I know you're going to be contributing to the meeting. Marcy Sheldon is here as a guest today. Right, you're here. You're still today's meeting for all intents and purposes. You are clearly a functional director of this trust, so we thank you for that. So, colleagues, a warm thank you. Into the previous meeting on the 25th of August, are you happy to go through an accurate record? Matters arising, the action log.
Yes, so there are two open actions. One we'll cover later on the agenda, which relates to the BAF risk, and the other one was the chairman about writing to trusts.
Yeah, and there's a letter with Lorraine, and we're just clarifying the circulation list to make sure you're for relevant hospital. That has been drafted and is ready to go. And what I've said to my colleague chairs is that non-executive and other board members will be making quality visits from time to time to speak to our crew on site in hospitals to check on their welfare and to receive any appropriate feedback. I've said that you will be wearing appropriate name badge and tabards. We all have our tabards, so we will be wearing those. And we only go into the building with the knowledge of the local manager. So you'll seek out those in charge of the local emergency department before you enter the building. So those are protocol. But that is a good way of engaging with our crew. So I think that's a way to see life for real and hear feedback from our colleagues. So I encourage you to do that. So is that the, are we clear on the actual otherwise?
Yeah.
Thank you. Can we just then move on, please, just to sort of headline of my chair's report, which is before you in the pack, but really just to introduce that we've rearranged the way this meeting is set out in order to ensure we have appropriate discussions regarding the quality improvement strategy, regarding our strategic direction, and also the current risk that we're running. So we've the agenda has been reordered, so we're going to have to learn to just work our way through that this morning. In support of the agenda, we have key source documents such as our performance plan, performance documentation, and our various reports are documented. We're not taking those as specific page turning items, but they are there as reference. And I've asked colleagues, please, in your questioning, and your comments to make sure you're referencing back to the key source documentation that's available to you to ensure that the meeting runs smoothly. We also plan to use the assurance cycle, which is detailed in the report as well. And again, as part of our big board improvement programme, is to ensure that when we have our discussion, we not only do we summarise at the end, but we're very clear about actions. And we complete that cycle to make sure that we don't leave any room for doubt. You know, who's taking the action to go to the agreed timescale, and then comes back to an appropriate meeting timescale that we set out. So it's a different way of organising things, but it's good. We think it's a better effect. And we're also going to wise the development programme as a board, and we're studying the chief executive tonight, the commission, to ensure the board is working effectively. Thank you for your participation in that. It's currently ongoing. We've had some initial feedback, but we'll take more detailed feedback next month in October. Thank you for your participation in that, and it's part of this important process we're going through to ensure that we're fit for purpose for the future and to meet the various challenges that we have. Another really important item on the agenda today is with the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. And just to note, we did have a session as a board with the National Guardian, and some of which the issues which the board was great value on, very important part of our meeting today. Just to remind colleagues regarding the training, I know there's been some, I included encountered some IT glitches, but the training, can I ask colleagues to please complete that by the end of October, make sure that we're all aware. Given some of the IT glitches. One of the also important items that pre-runs this on the first item is our audit committee. You'll see there's a key risk escalated there regarding steps we're taking to improving our culture, and that's a key area for this board. It started, the culture of this organisation starts and finishes with this board. We're responsible for it. We set the tone. It's a really important part of how we do things in CCAM is crucial, and the way we behave, the way we act as a board sets the tone for the rest of the organisation. That's the important discussion we're going to come to. In the last month, we also had the annual members meeting, which is always a very interactive event. I'm Fiona, I was very pleased to hear that meeting. You mentioned the clinical advisory group, which you've set up. That's now met, and has there been some good discussions in that group?
Yes, Chairman, it's met twice now. The initial meeting was virtual. The next meeting, the most recent one, was face to face. It was well attended, and the initial meeting was really just to set it up and ensure that everybody was happy with the terms of reference and the membership. The more recent meeting, which was last week, was really productive. In addition to the core membership, they invited members of frontline staff. So there was a paramedic from Planet who attended. Which is great, because she's been somebody who's been particularly vocal on the changes to airway management. So it was great to get her involved in the opportunity to have a good discussion. And the topics that were covered at the clinical advisory group were around how to disseminate information to staff and how they could utilise information. So given the additional platforms that we now have access to, that will give staff access to patient details, how widespread should that be? What information should staff have? So a really good discussion on that.
But for those, in fact, these are our senior clinicians in the trust, so we ensure that we're getting their views and they help formulate future clinical policy.
Yes, and it's across the trust. So we have representation from ops, from medical, from nursing and quality.
Fantastic. Very good. Well, thanks very much for your very positive. Thank you.
Chair, just Liz and I, after the annual members meeting, spoke to Andy Collin, who's actually extended an invitation to us to sit in. But what I think we've agreed is we'll let them bed in first and settle, and at an appropriate juncture we'll come in and just have a listen.
Great. That's right. That's good. Thank you. And also in my report is a summary of feedback we've had in recent leadership visits, which board members have made, speaking to our staff throughout the trust, both in corporate departments and in some of our frontline areas. Not going to go through the ones by essence, but I'm asking board members to reference that. I mean, when we're having discussions around culture and about other aspects of our organisation, we've got some rich feedback from our staff here, which I've summarised in my reports. And I really want people to keep that in mind. So when we're discussing an item, please refer back to that list and just check. Is this what our staff are saying to us? Is this relevant? What we're saying is going to make sense to them when we feed it back. So really encourage people just to use that as a source of reference. And we've got an ongoing process of visits now in place, which I think will help. And can I just say, also just give a trailer for our upcoming awards ceremonies, which members of the board will be at. We have the first one next Thursday, and then each week thereafter, there are. It's a busy time of year, but in all of the challenges that the NHS faces, this is a fantastic opportunity, and always is every year, where we celebrate not only long service, but the contribution our staff make to the care of patients and supporting each other. They're always very moving events. And it's they're also quite refreshing in the midst of all the challenges we're facing in the NHS currently, just to get direct feedback from patients that we've helped. So that is certainly part of the awards event next week. We're having direct feedback from patients who benefited the services of our clinicians. So they're very important events in our calendar. So I'm certainly looking forward to it. I know the members of the board are. So if I can conclude there for my report, and just ask Siobhan, the executive, to. So we're going to take the audit committee first. Audit risk committee again to set the scene in terms of main risks which the board, the organisation facing the board need to be aware of. So it was a good meeting. I think the general feedback very positive. Appropriate robust discussions, but fair, appropriate. So Michael, do you want to present your report?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Start with a very positive. We focus very much on reports from internal audit and the work that internal audit have done on fraud prevention. Nothing arose from those that I would wish to bring to the board's attention. So, the organisation is a good place in relation to those pieces of work. We focused on three areas which are very much reflected in today's agenda. We started by looking at risk, which is part of the key warning notices provided by CQC. We didn't receive the full risk register as such. That is in further development in light of recommendations that CQC have made. We were given assurance that appropriate work is being done to improve that. The recommendation that we did make is that I have seen work quite effectively in the past is where boards sit down and have what I would call a risk seminar, which is an opportunity to reflect in a bit more detail about risk and our understanding of risk and how it operates within the organisation. And the executive agreed to take that away and consider that. So I'm very pleased with that. The other observation that we made was that it is really, really important that the risk register enables the board and the audit committee to monitor and see how risks are being managed and that appropriate mitigating action is being put in place and that we are able to track improvements, and where improvements are not possible, we are confident around mitigating actions. If I go then into two more specific points which were raised by CQC, and this is the fourth warning notice, which is around culture and the way in which the organisation is treating its people and the confidence that the organisation has that we have just and fair culture in the organisation. The conclusion of the audit committee was that we were not assured in this space. We thought progress was too slow and that more remedial action is needed if we are to recover in that position. Pleased to note that both the chair and the chief executive are taking this very, very seriously, and it is a significant item on today's agenda, so there will be more discussion. The other issue where we had some concern was around freedom to speak up. Our conclusion there was that while it is clear that people within CCAM feel confident to raise issues, the volume of issues that have been raised demonstrate that. We're not convinced as of yet that we're appropriate systems within place to ensure that lessons are learned and appropriate action is taken to deal with systemic issues. Our conclusion was there needed to be a much greater management grip on this particular issue if we are to demonstrate to CCAM people that we have a fair and just culture. I'm not escalating that to the board today because we have a separate paper. That paper was already planned to give us further assurance. I should note that 2 additional members of staff have been appointed and will take up post in October. But I would add that while that is a good result to which the executive are to be congratulated, there is still considerable amount of work to be done to ensure that we have systems that are fit for purpose. But as I said, this is an item on the board where we can have further discussion going forward. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Michael's? Are we satisfied with the agenda we've got in front of us today? That what Michael's outlined, do you feel as a board you've got sufficient information to get into those items that I clarified all about?
Yeah, one comment on the BAP and just reflecting in preparation. Now that we have the BAP sort of improved and could align some of the improvement journeys, and in this new format, what I felt was missing was for each one of the BAP, what are the control metrics, and the IQR now has some very specific coding. So, you know, QS20, for instance, QS17 relates to BAF risk 256. So I think that would strengthen the BAF in the new format of the agenda, where the BAF could triangulate immediately and say, these are the 2 to 3 codes in the IQR that the board should refer to. Then we can see that assurance also in the metrics. And it will also tell us we have data gaps in the IQR where we're not monitoring some of the risks in the right way. So that was my observation from preparing for the board in this new format.
Thank you. I would accept that, David, and I think that's excellent work. I think really it is now how as a board use that information.
As part of our policy of continuing improvement, you'll see the BAF in a different form today, which improved form. I hope the initial reaction from colleagues just in terms of that, one of your key sort of documents as a board. Are you beginning to be more satisfied that the BAF is now giving you a picture of the organisation and the main risks, the main strategic risks that were?
Yeah, I thought it was a big improvement in terms of clarity of the risks and the explanations. I thought that was good.
Yeah, for you generally, Chair?
Absolutely, it's tied together a lot more, but there's a lot of things changing quickly, which is good. The reports and the agendas are getting better all the time.
Thank you. I think yes, positive continuing improvement, but continuing improvement with pace. So, yeah, thank you. If we now move on to major sort of agenda items, ones of keeping patients safe. Sorry, Chief Executive, I do apologise, Siobhan, your report.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just take you through a couple of key points in the report and then happy to answer any questions. So just starting off with the Executive Management Board, you know, just based on what we heard at the Audit Committee last week, I think there is a theme here around both executive and subcommittee and board diligence and efforts in improving the risk management and risk management reporting infrastructure across the organisation. And you can see from the report, we've spent a bit of time at EMB also looking at the progress that's been made around policy change, training, migration of the incident management software from Datex to Datex Cloud, what that's meant for us. So there has definitely been a huge amount of work around risk management. I think the next phase for us now, as identified at the Audit Committee, is real coherence in the reporting up and down the organisation of risks at various operational, corporate, executive and board level meetings. So that remains work in progress, but a consistent theme, I think, of discussion and effort over the last few weeks. We had an EMB meeting yesterday as well, and just to give you some assurance around Paul's point around improvement in reporting, we recognise that at Executive Management Board, our next area of focus for the next month or so is the infrastructure of groups that sit underneath the Exec Management Board, a review of terms of reference and effectiveness, and then a forward plan of chairs' reports from those groups into the Executive Management Board. The reason I wanted to explain that is we've been working on that for the last couple months to just get an up-to-date picture of the governance underneath EMB. And what that will mean is over time, the Chief Executive's report at board will therefore change to reflect some of the issues, escalations, key points of discussion that come up from, say, an IT steering group, an estate steering group, a operational performance group. So over time, this report will be a bit more consistent with the types of performance discussions and chairs reports that the EMB will start to receive. So that is the next kind of iteration of the journey about EMB agendas and the type of content that will come through to EMB. Just to say, the investment decisions there on point number 6, the expansion of the clinical education team is absolutely a priority for us to make sure that we have a workforce supply that comes through that meets the needs of the future demand for us. Also, in that sentence, we must say that there is a real question around affordability at this point in the financial year. And so I know David and Martin have been working closely with Ash Richardson at the Clinical Education Centre to make sure that we revise the business case to ensure that we develop and expand and that it's affordable. And of course, those two things need to somehow fit into the equation. So total commitment to expansion of clinical education, ongoing work around affordability, which is really important. On the point of engagement, it's been an interesting month, and you can see a couple of the engagements that I've had and that we've had with regards to NHS England, the regional Southeast Director, and also the NHS England's National Chief Executive. So in addition to that, I was invited to a ministerial roundtable yesterday with Robert Jenrick, who will have a particular interest and leadership role in the ambulance sector. And what I'm hearing in all of the events that I've been at is a real commitment and understanding that if you remember, the new Secretary of State talked about A, B, C and D in the priorities for the government as we head into the winter, A being the ambulance sector. What I'm assured about is that there is real understanding at ministerial, Department of Health and NHS England level that the A needs to fit into the system solutions that contribute to ambulances being able to respond in a more effective way. So there was no conversation in any of the events I've been at that led me to think there was a focus on performance management of ambulance trusts with regards to the ambulance response target. It was more how, as systems, do we work together in preparedness for a difficult winter to, for example, create alternative pathways, understand where the pressure points in access to primary care are, work with our acute trusts around hospital handovers. So a real welcome focus around systems, which I'll continue to be involved in and make sure that that vein of conversation does pervade through the next few weeks and months as we hit some of the operational challenges that will look different for us, I think, this winter. The chair spoke about leadership engagement, and I think my reflection on this is many of us have heard the will of our people to engage in meaningful dialogue, to see us. It's always tricky in such a geographically dispersed organisation, but to see us and talk to us and hear from us. We have changed some of the way we deliver our communications out to the organisation, and we've had good feedback about changes to using video as a mode of communication, and also the weekly bulletin where it's slightly more interactive. I just wanted to touch, and I know board members are aware, I just wanted to touch on the community Facebook page. I overwhelmingly heard from people their fairly serious concerns about how the impact of the dialogue on that social media platform was impacting them and their colleagues. So we responded to that. The vast majority of people who've contacted me have responded in a very heartfelt and positive way around it being the right decision to move to a different way of using social media and to reset the kind of behaviours and what we expect from the employees of CCAM with regards to our values of compassion and respect and integrity. So just to say, Janine and the comms team are working on an alternative that we already have available to us, which sits within the Microsoft Teams infrastructure, very corporate, professional user interface. So we will be communicating over the next week or so what that looks like in terms of the transition to that new platform, and also it will be in parallel to an upgrade to our intranet, which makes those two things compatible to work together over the coming weeks and months. So I'm excited by the opportunity to engage differently, and the overwhelming feedback that I had and that we responded to was that it was no longer a constructive two-way engagement platform. It became something that was less in line with trust value. So I think that's an exciting future for us in terms of using social media in a different way. We've already touched on the transition, and just to echo the chair's thanks to David for, as I said on Monday, a very, very, very long service at CCAM, and I know that there's been a roller coaster ride at times, but David, thank you for your resilience and your commitment to the cause of improvement here at CCAM. And just to remind colleagues that from the 1st of October, Martin, who's here as guest today, will be our interim CFO, and we look forward to welcoming Martin to future board meetings. We've already touched on the annual members meeting, and of course, since we met last, we had the sad news of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Thank you to everybody in the Trust who worked tirelessly over that difficult period. I know that Emma and the emergency planning team also lent into the needs of London Ambulance Service in particular, and on the roundtable I just mentioned yesterday, the Chief Executive of London Ambulance Service paid tribute to the whole ambulance sector for providing mutual aid to London to manage the huge influx of people and the demands that they experienced. So thank you to everybody at the Trust who both worked the shifts in difficult circumstances and worked to support others, particularly London Ambulance Service. And then I just mentioned the new Secretary of State, and Therese Coffey has been very clear, I think, about the priorities as we move forward. And as I say, from the Minister of State from Health yesterday, I think that the ambulance sector will remain a high priority as we move forward into winter, and with an understanding that other system partners will need to contribute to some of the new ways of working or the different things that we need to do to ensure that the ambulance sector is effective as it can be as we move forward. And then I was just going to move to the last section, escalation to the board. So the improvement journey, we will have opportunity to touch on through the rest of the agenda. I think the escalation from the audit committee feels like the absolute accurate reflection of where at exec level we feel there needed to be escalation and a change in course and a different approach to resourcing the people and culture infrastructure. And I know Ali's got some plans that are already in train that we'll be able to discuss in the relevant part of the agenda. And then just finally on operational performance, I think this comes back to my earlier point around the exec management board. I don't think we're quite there with the level of reporting that we need around operational performance for us to internally manage the business. We absolutely are great at servicing the external needs of commissioners and national data sets around the national standards. But for me, there's a lot more, and I think this may come up in the IQR. We've got a huge number of metrics. I think we need to now, as an exec, be able to distill the 5 or 6 really important ones in each domain and be able to talk to you with confidence about the risks, the issues, the mitigations, the actions we're taking. So I think for operational performance, we agreed yesterday that we are in level 3 at REAP. So just on point 36 at the end there, update at the end of September is we remain in level 3. But I think that there is more, there's more information we need to have at exec management board, which will then feed up to board discussions aligned with changes to how we present our sections in the IQR and the new agenda as set. So I think there's work to do for us there, but suffice to say, I think the last month has been peaks and troughs of demand, down to level 3 at REAP, which is better than where we've been for a while. But everybody very much with a consciousness that as we go into October, winter becomes that much more prevalent, I think, in our day-to-day discussions. So I'll pause there, Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Before I open it up to questions from your colleagues, Siobhan, can I just say from the chair, just say thank you for your making a stand about the way in which people in CCAM interact with each other and setting and living the values of this organisation, and particularly your stand on that Facebook issue. I think there's culture is very important part. The culture of CCAM is an important part of the meeting this morning. I said it starts and finishes with the board, but also the tone set by the chief executive is crucial in this. Can I just say thank you? Because quite frankly, I think all of us as a board, I hope we're all united on this. There are standards of behaviour linked to the trust values, which we expect everyone to be a board member, or whether you are what member of the CCAM team. And it's really crucial that this is made absolutely clear from the board. And I hope one of the outputs in due course of our culture work is we once and for all say from this board that trust values are key. And if you don't work with the trust values inevitably, this is not the organisation for you. Go somewhere else, because it's really important that we have standards of behaviour, that we have trust among the workforce, and that we can speak respectfully to each other even when there's a disagreement. And what we must do is have it face to face and not resort to social media in order to make points anonymously about our colleagues. So it's really important. So I thank you for that, Chair, for your stand on that. And I can assure you, you have the board united in that action. But colleagues, there's a very detailed report here from the Chief Executive. Any questions or comments on that report?
Yeah, thank you. Siobhan, thank you, an excellent report. And just to say the feedback that I've had, a few visits that I've done, your message is going down very well. So I would echo what the Chair said and support you. My question is really about, I'm very keen on accountability. It is really brilliant that the Secretary of State, and the Minister are focusing on the whole system approach. But as we go into winter, do you know, are the integrated care system or ICB, are they going to publish a plan that is visible to the public that shows how they are working with us and across the system to address some of these imbalances that is creating the major problems that they're seeing? I think that's really important for me. Do you know if that's going to happen?
Well, there's two things they've been asked to do at integrated care board level. One is produce a winter plan, which covers, the variety of actions and is distilled up from the provider sector providing winter plans. And actually Emma and the team looked at ours yesterday. So they will need to produce a winter plan. But importantly, on the accountability bit, what they're being asked to do by NHS England is add various parts of the winter plan to their board assurance framework. So the accountability seems to be through the public discussions at public ICB meetings related to their board assurance framework. So it does feel that ICBs are being held to account much more than I've previously experienced. It did come up a couple of times yesterday, and I reinforced the fact that in addition to the ICB accountability for this, there is also a new commissioning guideline for ICBs that was published in August that relates to the ambulance sector. And if they can deliver on that, it will also help because it creates coordination and consistency and coherence about plans that are within CCAM, but also with system partners.
Chair, I think that's really helpful. I would suggest that future boards, particularly as we go through the winter, you give us an update on whether you think that those are really.
Yeah.
Because my concern in the past is I don't think the rest of the system has recognised the pressure on the ambulance sector, and there are issues beyond our control that we can't do anything about. And I think that would be very good to have those.
Yeah.
Thank you. That is very clear.
The test is very welcome. We also have to make sure we deliver on our promises.
Yeah.
As well. So that's going to be really crucial, isn't it? Sue,
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased, Siobhan, to hear about the Facebook page movement. So thank you for doing that. I think that's the right thing to do in terms of our culture. I had two questions really. First was on clinical education business case. And I understand that you have to consider affordability. What I'd like to know is what is the time scale for that, because we're under a lot of pressure in terms of trying to get the various cohorts through and trying to work with our partners at Crawley College and the various other universities. So it'd be good to have some indication of the time scale that those business cases are going to be completed in. And then my second question was really around, there's been an absence nationally around workforce planning, as we know, and we are committed to doing some workforce planning here within CCAM, which I think is a very good thing. But in your interactions with some of our regional partners, and given that some of our commissioning and lead commissioning is going to change, has there been any further commitment around regional workforce planning? We talked to Stephen Lightfoot about this, and when they were just setting up their ICS and ICBs, and there wasn't a firm commitment, but he mentioned and said that there was some interest in doing that. Have we got any further information on that, given that our paramedics, some of them are leaving and moving on to other things? So it'd be good to have some kind of regional planning around that.
Yeah, really, really good questions. On the clinical education business case, I might just ask Martin for an update, because I know you've worked closely in the last 24 hours on this in terms of timeline and expectation.
Yeah, so we've had a few goes of this business case. The issue we face in terms of approving it, it doesn't give us the capacity information we need. What does the current clinical education service bias in terms of how many people we can see, and therefore what are the increases and how do they relate to the numbers we're expecting to see in various areas? That's the piece of work that's ongoing. We got it to a state where we were comfortable to submit it to the Surrey Heartlands Innovation Fund process, which we did yesterday, hoping to get some external funding because there was no funding identified in the business case. But I had a good discussion with Matthew Knight last night about how we might take this forward. So there is still ongoing work. So we've drafted in some support from the performance team to support Ash to be able to produce some basic capacity and throughput metrics, so that will allow us to stage the investment in a sensible way. So, you know, where are the priorities? And I think he's done some work about the priority setting. And where do we absolutely need it? So you use Crawley College as an example. That's one area we know we need to prioritize. So we just need to get the case into a reasonable position. I would hope it's not going to take any longer than the end of next week to get it in a finished state, to be perfectly honest. And I'm hoping I can hear back from the Surrey Heartlands Innovation Fund to try and get some external sourcing. So that's the sort of timeline we're working to.
It feels that there's some pace there, Martin. Thank you. So yeah, can we have obviously Chairman of the Workforce Committee to be kept informed of the progress and their work with you, and then we'll bring it back as an action to this next meeting, because this is an important strategic item for the trust, and we'll make sure we have an appropriate discussion. But as you say, we have to have a source of funding identified. We have to have financial discipline as well as dealing with our strategic challenges. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And so on the workforce planning, if I'm honest, no is the simple answer. There isn't real coherence at regional or national level. It did come up a couple of times yesterday in the ministerial discussions, and the minister and advisors acknowledged that one thing that needs to happen is that there is a fully funded national workforce plan, which there is in development, some work at national level being undertaken. And I guess the question is, does that national workforce plan need to inform the regional one? Probably. So I've been told that it's due in the autumn. I'm not sure where autumn ends and winter finishes. So there is work going on around the national one. I think more locally and at ICB level, I think we can influence more. So I raised that very issue with ICB system partners last week, that if everybody chooses to advertise for a paramedic in urgent treatment centres, emergency departments, primary care, then the ambition around responsiveness of CCAM and the ambulance sector to get to patients in a timely manner is not going to be achieved. So I've heard our consultant paramedics a couple of times here talk about portfolio careers, joint working, and I think that's the conversation that we now need to have. You're right, as board members are aware, there's been a recent announcement around the I guess the sharing of Kent, Surrey, Sussex wide accountability across our 3 lead ICBs, and that means that the CCAM accountability will move from the 1st of October in a phased way across to Sussex. Surrey will retain their 3 county-wide responsibility for pharmacy, optometry and dentistry delegated commissioning, which is a massive piece of work, and Kent will assume specialised commissioning for Kent, Surrey and Sussex. So that feels like a kind of balance of labour and effort across the 3. I think our job with Sussex now is to get round the table with their chief people officers. I know Ali knows many of them. They are a more cohesive unit than in some other parts of the country. A new ICB chief people officer has come down that I know Ali also knows come down from the Midlands. So there's ripe opportunity, I think, for us to dock into at least a Sussex ICB conversation that says, how can you help us at regional level to create a balanced perspective on portfolio careers, working in partnership, shared learning opportunities, so that we don't continually see that drift. So I guess in short, I think there's things we can do in the here and now locally. I think the national workforce plan will probably drive the more HEE, NHS England approaches to the South East region at larger scale. Ali might want to.
So I recently did a briefing session for the 3 chief people officers for the 3 ICBs, plus there were a number of other people present at that meeting as well. And I think reinforce what you're saying, Sean, which is that I think that given that a couple of them are very new to the patch and one is about a year into the job, you know, it was the barest minimum that I can hope out of that was they left with an appreciation of the scale of the challenge and the fact that we needed to really focus on the issue that we face as an individual trust, but also the system faces overall, because we have no objection to the system employing more paramedics, but actually what we're concerned about is there's sufficient supply for all. And I think actually they left with a sort of like a clear message that was the case. So we'd already provided quite a lot of data and information for that, but I think that the feedback I've had from that session was really helpful, I think, in terms of understanding. I think the key bit now is, of course, the action afterwards, which is the bit we need to follow up on, I think. So there's further discussions planned on that.
Given the personal links, it feels like an opportunity with sort of Sussex ICB. So I think we're on good terms at all levels with Sussex. So as we were with the Surrey, but I think with Sussex, we've got some focus, attention. So I think we will in a much better position.
All my points have been addressed. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan. Thanks for the report. I just wanted to follow up on the leadership visits and just say it was great last week in the comms to see you said we did comments, and I guess we just wanted assurance that there will be an ongoing programme of comms around that.
Yeah, Janine and I were just talking about it before the meeting actually. So absolutely, the staff survey launches next week, and this week's weekly message, which is the written version, will pick that theme up around you said we did. And I think ongoing, it's really important that we don't focus too much on telling people about what we're doing with the improvement journey, but we hear from them and we close that loop that says we've heard, for example, as I said earlier, I heard consistently that people ask for different approaches to comms and engagement, and I can point to 3 fairly significant ones and the changes that we've made in the last couple of months, which have gone down well, as colleagues have said. So use of video, change to weekly bulletin, and a change to the approach with Facebook. So I think we need to package those up a bit more. I know Janine's doing some work as well around, abuse to our staff and what we did around clinical skills training. There are some things we can point to that changes have been tangible and have been beneficial. So absolutely, we'll continue with that.
We've got a whole series of them planned, Liz, and what Siobhan and I are very focused on is making sure they are real things. So it won't say we've signed up to a national programme. It will say, we have protected police skills training, as that one did. We have set up a new group involving lots of staff to look at reducing violence and aggression. Those sort of quite real things that I think are what staff want to see.
Yeah, they should be delivering on our promises. Thank you. That's great. That's great news. Can I move this on? Because we're just slightly a bit behind time. That's an important discussion. Thank you for a very comprehensive report, Siobhan, which highlights a range of issues we're going to discuss today, but also which are live in the organisation. So we move on then to important sections of delivering quality, so keeping patients safe. I think, Fiona, we're going to start with this point, start with the board story. We deliberately put this in a different place in the agenda, haven't we?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, this board account story is an account from a very articulate patient who describes the distress and frustration that he experienced following a very long delay in our responding to him after he dislocated a total hip replacement at home.
Fiona, thank you for that. Very moving. And really helps frame the discussion that we're about to have around the quality. And I think it really brings home in the course of the board meeting and its relevance to the next section regarding looking at the quality of our service and how we provide it and our performance. And that's it's those stories which are the heart of really what we've got to change for the better, with our colleagues in the wider healthcare system. So, if colleagues are content with that, I can ask you to bear that in mind in your questioning when we're hearing from Fiona and Rob regarding the quality report. Bear that in mind and coming back with the challenging your questions, to ensure that we are dealing with this appropriately in the best way that we can. Fiona and Rob. Rob, you're going to
so I'm just going to talk about our quality improvement journey first of all. So part of our quality improvement journey for the organization, we've got a quality improvement work stream. And that work stream comprises of 7 key areas of work that support our people in keeping patients safe and provides that assurance to the trust board and the progress on outstanding risk. It's also aligned to the CQC warning notice 1, 2, 3. Just to recall, those are around quality of information, risk, clinical governance, and quality improvements. So there are no risk to escalate to the board in regards to those 7 work streams. They are progressing as planned. Just to note, in terms of the quality improvement part, which is a reference in the BAF reference 256, that we have appointed the Director for Quality Improvement as of the 1st of November. But please know that we will start off on our a journey in terms of developing and implementing our quality improvement strategy. So that from the 1st of April next year, we will have a strategy and a QI program in place. Just moving on to the quality integrated quality report. So the quality improvement work stream or the journey is reflective of the information that's presented in the quality improvement report. There are four key areas which myself and Fiona will concentrate on, and those are on page 10, 11, and 15 of the IQR. So I will start off. So on page 10, you will find the SI incidents and violence and aggression information. What I would say is that month on month, there is an improving picture in terms of SIs and incident backlogs. So the numbers are ahead of what the trajectory we have set for those particular areas. Just to note that to ensure that we don't get back to the position that we started off in, and especially as we are approaching the challenging winter months, what I've put in is a set brief tolerance escalation points in there where myself and medical director will intervene as and when required. If I go on to the violence and aggression, you will see that the number of cases reported is consistent. We have about 100 or so cases on average being reported. There is an increase in reports, which is really good, because we know that violence and aggression is underreported, particularly in areas such as 111 and EOC. So the piece of work we're doing is to raise awareness. So what I would expect to happen is to see the numbers increasing. There are a number of mechanisms that we have put in place to support staff. So I'll just name two before I pass on to Fiona. We've implemented a violence and reduction working group that's taken forward the recommendations of the NHS violence reduction standards, which is good. We've got much better relationships now with the police service, and we have the 2 recent cases where a person was given a 24 weeks jail sentence for spitting at our staff, and then we've got a person who is currently in prison awaiting trial for next week, in fact, for threatening a staff with a weapon. So we are taking matters really seriously, and that key working relationship with the police is important. One of the gaps, I would say, in this particular area is around a conflict resolution training. I've asked the group to look at this because it's an online training, and this really needs to be face to face. So pass over to.
Just on the violence and aggression issues, Rob, I was just suggesting we hold back colleagues' questions on that for the we've got an item later on the workforce committee. That's an escalated item, so we'll come back to questions around violence and aggression. But thank you, pleasing to know the progress that we're making there. Fiona.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob. So I've got two specific areas to highlight. The first is around medicines management, and that brings together the improvement journey, the extreme risks on the register, and the pages in the integrated quality report. This relates to the medicines portfolio, and I believe that all the mitigations that we can put in place have already been put in place. But going forward, we've now got 2 business cases going to the business case group in October, which will address the medicines transformation and the relocation of the medicines distribution centre. There is a risk which has now become an issue, and that is evidence that the Trust has now got around drug-seeking behaviour by patients in relation to our 111 electronic patient prescribing service, and this has been escalated to the regional local intelligence network. The other area I'd like to highlight, and this is from the integrated quality report, and that's around the care of patients with an ST elevation myocardial infarction, STEMI. And you'll note that there has been a significant improvement in the care bundle for these patients. We've gone up to over 75%, which is the first time we've achieved that, which is great, but it actually relates to something that our crews have been doing for some time, which is to use an alternative analgesic for these patients, which was not previously recognised, and we therefore didn't, if you like, tick the box and get points for it. However, we do now believe that the focus that we've had on this care bundle is actually counterproductive, and it's removing the focus on reducing on-scene time for these patients. And we've been doing some work with the regional cardiac network, who are fully supportive of this. And as a result, we have escalated this to the National Ambulance Service Medical Directors Group to see if we can get a change in that care bundle, so that we remove the bits of the care bundle which are, I think, hindering our staff making a rapid removal from scene, and actually bringing in targets around reducing on-scene time. So those are the 2 areas that I'd like to highlight.
Thank you. All colleagues, questions of the Mr. Director?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I came in. It's not very interesting, but you didn't really address, did you, the point that gentleman raised? And the important thing he said was, I was left waiting for 10 hours now, I've heard this also in my local community. I understand that we can't always meet performance targets because of what the constraints that we're facing, but it isn't